Hey guys, it's Nyosha here from Vagation, and I am sitting with the very esteemed Attorney James T Maye. So he is a phenomenon, but I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to take his word for it. And so today we have a Q&A session with Attorney Maye to know all about your real estate needs. But it's not just real estate. It's not just learning how to be an informed buyer. It's learning about your estate planning. It's learning about bankruptcy. It's learning all about you. So join us. Attorney James Maye, welcome.
Thank you. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is James Maye. I'm a local attorney licensed in Connecticut and New York. I've been practicing law now for the past 29 years. I'm born and raised in Stamford, and I'm a graduate of Mount St. Mary's College in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and Columbia University School of Law in New York. In addition, I attended NYU Stern School of Business, pursuing a PhD in business, and ended up leaving there with a master's in business. So upon graduation, I spent time on Wall Street as a securities lawyer, and then about 20 years ago, I went out on my own for my own law practice.
That's fantastic. See, I told you, he was a phenomenon. He's just amazing. And so you're admitted to practice law in both New York and Connecticut. That's pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, it was hard work, but at the time of graduation from college, from law school, I decided to pursue both licenses. I started out in New York, is where I began my initial practice, and then moved to Connecticut about 6 years later.
Fantastic. They say if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. That's true.
Awesome. So, as a realtor, I often get asked, what do I need to do? What do I need to take? What do I need to say to the attorney? So that's actually one of the very first questions that I have for you. What can a buyer do to fully prepare to meet with you?
The biggest issue with the buyers are, although they sign their binder, which is their offer, and in certain cases they sign an actual contract, many times they don't really appreciate the terms of the agreement. The biggest challenge for them is the financing piece. So I have clients who, upon signing the contract and meeting with me, I say, well, where's the additional deposit? And he said, deposit? I thought that was due at closing. He said, there's an additional amount that's due at closing, but there's a certain amount that's due upon signing contract. The reason why that becomes an issue for some clients that I have is that their money may be locked up in investments and things like that, so they need to provide the whoever's holding their funds notification, and it could be 10 days before those funds are released. So the key is really making sure that prior to their meeting with me, they have a full understanding of how money is to be distributed as part of the contract or the offer.
That's awesome. And so one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Vagation is educating the buyer. And so that's something that I definitely discuss with the buyers in advance. I want to know where the money is coming from, but also the lender. If you bring the lender in early enough, they should be having these discussions as well, right? So we have to be diligent as realtors to do our part to bring the buyers to you and help them be fully prepared. So in addition to having those conversations up front with our buyers, what can we do as realtors to aid in this preparation of meeting with you?
Yeah, I think really, and you're actually one of the few who appears to be doing it, but really honing in on all the terms of that actual offer, the amount that's due at contract signing. You're collecting the binder, so that part is straightforward, but many times when the client comes to me at the contract stage, it's that second piece about providing the contract deposit. Once again, they're really focused on what's due at closing and not separating it to, there's two components to it. One is what's being brought at contract signing, and then the balance that's due at closing. And that's where the gap is in many of the cases that I've experienced.
Awesome. And for those that are wondering, could you just elaborate briefly on what the binder includes?
Yes, so after the initial meeting with the realtor and you go out and investigate the property and do the inspections and things like that, the next stage Well, let me back up. Many times what ends up happening is the client sits down with the realtor and says, I'm interested in this property, and they go see the property. At that point in time, a binder is created, and the binder is actually an offer to purchase. Within that, you indicate exactly what your contract amount is going to be, how much you're going to put down as the actual binder deposit to secure the offer. So if you're offering $300,000, the typical binder deposit is 1% of that amount, so you'll put down $30,000 at that point. And then depending on how you've structured it, you may say, well, I want to come to closing with the bank providing 96.3 or 96.5% of the loan amount, which means in that case they're doing something called an FHA mortgage. And so when you put together all the terms of the contract, you're going to stipulate, all the terms of the binder, you're going to stipulate how much is going to be put down as part of the offer, which is 1%, how much is going to be brought at the time of contract signing. An example I just gave of FHA financing, which is providing people who have maybe some issues with their credit or deposits, a lower amount to put down. At that contract signing point, you would put down the other 2.5%. And then in this case, since you're doing FHA, which is 96.5% financing, you would be bringing theoretically zero at closing. Doesn't always work out that way, obviously, because the bank has fees that they're deducting out of their loan. Also, in that binder, will stipulate exactly what inspections you're going to get done. If it's a condominium, you're really just focused on the inside. Sometimes the inspector will also inspect the roof and things of that nature. If you're doing a home inspection or a single family residence, then you're also going to get tested for radon, and a whole lot of other inspections are done, and that's listed in the actual binder. So the binder spells out the amount of money you're paying, how you're structuring that payment, and also what type of inspections you're going to get done. It has dates for when you're supposed to complete the inspections, dates for when you're supposed to get your financing in place, and dates for when you're supposed to actually close. And so that's kind of the binder in a nutshell.
That is incredible, and that is so informative. I hope you all got that. That was great information. Thank you. So you actually provide a lot of information, and I know this from working with you both personally and professionally. What would you say is one of the most common issues that you see in real estate transactions?
On the buyer side, the most common, and I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, as do you, it's really not an issue with the buyer, it's an issue with the lender. And it's good to find a strong lender that is going to meet the timelines you stipulate in your contract. I find that we have dates in the contract saying the mortgage is going to be approved by a certain date, and the seller's relying on those dates because the seller's making decisions based on those items. The seller may be planning to sell their home, so they need funds to make an offer or down payment. They don't want to secure their new residence unless they know they have a solid buyer, which means their financing is in order. And so what I'm finding is there are a lot of, I won't call them fly-by-night mortgage companies, but there are some mortgage companies that are less thorough than others, and they're not doing their job in meeting the time requirements. So what we usually have as the biggest issue is not meeting what they call the mortgage contingency date, which is a date that you stipulate in your binder, in your contract, by which you'll get your mortgage. And I'm finding that a lot with some of these lenders.
Wow, that's great information as well. So let me ask you this question then. Since the lender can be one of the most common issues, and us as realtors need to do some education to get the buyers to you, and then you educate the buyer when they come in to actually meet with you, why do most realtors feel attorneys kill their deals?
That's a good question. So in terms of the attorneys killing the deal, that can take place in two stages. One is the initial stage after when the offer is signed. So after the binder is signed and inspections are completed, depending on where you're located, you may end up going to what they call an attorney contract. So in Lower Fairfield County, definitely, in most of Fairfield County, we use what's called a Bar Association contract. In New Haven County and other parts of Connecticut, they'll use what's called a realtor's contract. In a realtor's contract, they spell out all the legal terms. And so by the time I see the contract or any attorney sees the contract, the transaction is basically consummated and we're just trying to close it. When you're using a binder and going into what they call a bar attorney's contract, some of the attorneys, this is where the overkill comes in. They try to over negotiate these contracts. And by doing that, they sometimes kill the deal because they insist on having certain provisions in the contract to make the deal work, which are really not necessary. But they get into this battle of, who's the better attorney and who's protecting their client the most, when actually they should be focused on the fact that we need to get this deal done to the satisfaction of both parties. So that's one instance where the attorney is believed to be killing the deal. The second piece is when the buyer's financing is partially approved. So sometimes the bank comes back and says, we approve this mortgage and it's subject to 3 or 4 conditions. Most of the conditions are easily satisfied. And so at that point in time, the attorney should be in a position to speak with the client and say, look, you need to waive this mortgage contingency so that the seller can take steps to secure their premises for where they're relocating to. Some attorneys will not release that provision, saying that until everything is removed, I want you to continue to exercise your rights to back out of this contract due to the mortgage provision. Some sellers get frustrated because sometimes the bank is waiting for something as simple as a tax return. Well, you can produce a tax return, but the attorney may say, well, we're not going to waive the condition until that tax return is presented. And that can actually result in parties feeling that that the attorney is trying to kill the deal.
I understand. And so it's important that we know these facts and we also deal with attorneys that can educate us on these factors alone. Do you think that distinguishes your practice from others, the amount of education that you give to clients?
Absolutely. So we spend a fair amount of time educating the clients up front so that they understand how the process works. And they value the fact that 90% of the time, if they call, I'm actually going to answer the phone right away. And if not, I'm going to call them back. If it's something simple like what is the date that this contract is expecting to comply with the mortgage contingency, I'll just have my paralegal call. But when it comes to actually explaining the contract, explaining the issues, explaining where we are in the process with the loan, I actually am the person that speaks with the client. So they're happy, and what distinguishes me from other attorneys is they actually speak to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the fact that we can get you on the phone and not have to go through hoops and hurdles to get a simple answer. Do you also pride yourself most on educating your clients, or what do you pride yourself most on when it comes with the clients that you serve?
Yeah, it's the education and the attention to detail and making sure that they're fully protected. So I've had instances where clients have come to me after initially being represented by another attorney because they weren't satisfied with the communication. They weren't providing them with information. And so people would come to me, it'd be a little bit messy because I have to clean up some of the failures of the prior representative, but it's that level of communication and detail that I pride myself on because it's makes the clients happy.
Sure, and that's what it's all about. Awesome. So we have our real estate 101 captured. I want to talk to you now about 2 different areas.